In this episode of the Marylanders on the Go, we go over all the differences between the Mainship 390 and the Mainship 400. If you're in the market for a coastal cruiser, a boat for overnights in the Great Lakes, or up and down the Intercoastal Waterway, or possibly along America's Great Loop, then you just might be interested in a Mainship. If so, this is the video for you.
Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to talk a little bit about comparing some boats that we've toured, because we were looking for videos like this to compare and contrast. Specifically, what are they? The Mainship 390 and the Mainship 400.
Well, we didn't
find videos.
Our goal eventually is to do the Great Loops, and if you look at the statistics, the Mainships are the most common boats that complete the Great Loop pretty much each year for the last
many
4
years.
or 5 years.
Maybe more.
And the most common models are the 390 and the 400. So for a while we were looking at those two and we were wondering, what's the difference? And we never found a great video about it. But now we're going to hope to let you guys know what the differences are, because we did a lot of research and we figured out over time what the differences are.
Research and touring them as well. So hopefully this will be helpful to you.
So before we really talk about the 390 to 400, let's talk about the difference between the 350 and the 390. And some people just say they're really the same boat. And that's not entirely true. They are using the same hull mold, but they made a few changes when they started doing the 390. Now the 350 was built between 1996 and 1999, and they only built about 100 of these boats.
Oh wow.
And they were in St. Augustine, Florida is where they built the boats.
The Mainship 390s were built between 1999 and 2004, also built in St. Augustine, Florida. During those years, 400 of these boats were produced.
And what Mainship was good at is they listened to their owner input. So when people said, hey, we would like you to change this, or we really wish it had that, they really listened and they made changes. And so they really made changes every year. But the biggest difference between the 350 and the 390, there's a few major ones. And the biggest thing is the swim platform changed. They elongated it so that it would help with the handling of the boat. So people had a lot of issues with the handling of the 350, and that helped with the handling of the boat. And they also changed the secondary bedroom, the second stateroom, where it had a full bed. Now they switched it to 2 twin beds with a filler cushion. So you could do it 2 twins, or you could still do a full. And there are a few other minor changes here and there. They started using more stainless steel from aluminum, but it was just a little gradual transition from one to the next. The real reason why they changed it to 390 was they decided in 1999 most boat manufacturers were starting to include the swim platform and the bow pulpit as included in the length of the boat. So if you added a 2-foot swim platform and a 2-foot bow pulpit, your 390 now your 350 now becomes a 390. So that's kind of the reason why they changed the name, and other names of boats were kind of being changed around the same time.
Then, starting in 2003, Mainship transitioned their Mainship 390 into a new boat called the Mainship 400. These boats were about 1.5 feet longer than the Mainship 390, and these boats were built between 2003 and 2008. About 700 boats were produced also in the St. Augustine, Florida area.
Let's kind of go into the difference between the 390 and the 400. First of all, say that there were 700 of these boats produced.
Which one?
The 400.
700
of the Mainship 400s produced.
Okay.
And it's actually interesting because a lot of these boats are still in use today. The 390s, you see a lot of 390s. For a boat that only had 400 boats built, and even 350s, you still see some of them. Plenty of them. And so you see.
Were they all built in St. Augustine?
I think they were all built in St. Augustine.
Okay.
So if you start looking at the exterior of the two boats, what you notice first of all is you'll see that the steps leading up to the Flybridge for the 390 are curved. So they start on the starboard side and they kind of curve towards the center. And on the 400, the steps go straight down from the starboard side. So that's one thing that I think people recommended so they wouldn't take away some of the cockpit area. Also, the The door from the cockpit to the swim platform was in the center for the 390s, and they moved it to the starboard side for the 400s. I think people would put a little couch in there or something like that, and it's right in the middle of the, it's in the middle, and then that would be in the way of the door to get down to the swim platform. So they thought it'd be nicer if that was moved to the side. So they did that. So that was a nice little bonus. So another change on the exterior was on the starboard side walkway. In the 390, they had the water tanks on each side, and they were in the way, and that's how they had to raise the walkway. And so you have a little step down in order to get to the door that leads into the salon. But in the 400, they moved the water tanks so that they didn't have that step down. So it's more of a straight path, and then you can step into the salon. So that was an advantage there.
Another difference in the exterior of the 390 and the 400 is that the 400 has the more of a gunnel overhang, correct?
Yeah, so the walkway
is covered
around both sides, the starboard and the port side, is totally covered. If you're walking there in the rain, you're totally covered.
Yeah.
Whereas in the 390, it did have an overhang, but that was mostly just so that the windows would have a little bit of, you wouldn't get water right in the windows, which was a smart thing to do at the time. But then people said, well, I'd kind of like a overhang the whole way, so they put that out there. The one thing you find a lot in the 390s is the swim platform is waterlogged, and so there's a lot of, they use foam inside the swim platform, and that always got waterlogged. Every 390, they said, had problems with the swim platform getting waterlogged. So if you find a 390 that doesn't have that, that means it's been replaced. But in the 400, they decided to change that, so they didn't use foam, they used like full fiberglass, and they didn't have the problem that they had with the 390s, and that was a big improvement.
Yes.
Let's talk about the difference between the salon and the 390 versus the 400.
The salon and the 390 didn't have as much open space.
Right.
You're kind of all it's a bit tight, I feel like, in there.
Well, I think in all, the 400 is about a foot and a half longer than the 390. And I think that foot and a half is probably in the salon.
Yes.
And they swapped the two sides. I don't know if that's necessarily better one than the other, but in the 390, they have the galley on the port side and the seating areas on the starboard side right behind the lower helm. And then in the 400, they swapped that so that the galley is on the starboard side behind the helm, and then it has a little peninsula, and then the seating area is on the port side, and then in addition to that, in front is a little dinette area with like 4 seats. So that's like a big improvement that they made for the 400 that I think people.
So if you're looking for a dinette, that's a really good option.
A dedicated dinette in a Mainship, the 400 is probably your best bet. I think the width is the same in both. I think they're 14-foot beams in both boats, so you're not really getting too much difference there. Now, how about the staterooms? The 390 has that classic, what they call the headbanger wall in the main stateroom. So it's the overhang from the bow of the boat, so that when you're laying there, if you're laying on your back,
it's kind of above your head.
You kind of have it right above your head, and some people say they hit their head when they get up in the morning.
This is definitely here.
It's probably something you can get used to pretty easily.
Yeah, we're short, so we could probably push back and not have a problem.
Right.
But the 400 moved that bulkhead a little bit more forward, and so you have a little bit
less
more
likely.
room there, so you don't hit your head. They still have their same hanging lockers and storage under the bed and that kind of stuff, and it's still the same full. The bathroom hasn't changed down there. It's still a full dry head, so
separate shower
in both the 390 and the 400. But the secondary stateroom is a little different as well. That is a similar issue with the main stateroom. They have a little bit of more of a bulkhead there that in the 390 than they do in the 400.
Right, although the guests, anybody sleeping in there tends to put their head the other way,
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, but
so you just feel like your legs are underneath of a little bit more than they would be. They're not as open. But yeah, if you're putting your legs down there, maybe it doesn't matter as much. I think the space is about the same. They both do the twin beds with the filler cushion, so it's fairly similar as far as that goes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Flybridge.
So they both have a Flybridge as well as a lower helm, and in the Flybridge they've added in the 400 versus the 390 added a co-pilot chair.
Right.
And that is really nice.
Yeah. So in the 390, the side benches, they just go straight to the front, and then you're just sitting from the side, and then there's one
dedicated pilot's chair.
And they added a second one on the starboard side for the 400, and then that's nice to have that.
Yeah.
And then I guess the table, people didn't like the table that they had in the 390. This is the table that some people don't always like.
Yeah, they lean in a little bit.
They lean in a little bit, which better than leaning out.
But they do have this in case.
Right. So they have improved that table to make it a little more sturdy. And there's a table here, which is a really nice improvement over the 350 and 390 tables. It actually, I won't lift it up right now, but it does lift up nice on both sides, and it's a nice straight table with a little edge, so drinks won't fall, which is nice.
What about the summer kitchen?
The summer kitchen.
Now, did that come standard in the 400?
No, it wasn't
Okay.
standard.
But it was an option.
But it was an option.
And we've seen many of them that do have that delightful summer kitchen.
Yeah, it seems most of them have the summer kitchen.
Different.
Sorry,
Okay.
So
there's an airplane.
Yeah.
We might have to wait a moment.
I've heard different reviews about that outdoor grill in the summer kitchen. Some people say it's great. Some people say, it's not really worth it. It's almost, you'd rather just get your own grill.
Which is always an option, but it's pretty cool
nice
when you're
to have
touring
that.
a boat and you see that
Right.
built-in grill, and it's pretty big.
Right, and a lot of
It's
times
pretty big.
that summer kitchen has the grill, it has a sink, and it has an ice maker.
An ice maker. Or,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I wasn't sure if it was.
And some people have turned that
second-
into a
I was
fridge,
gonna
a
say
fridge or an ice
sometimes, yeah.
maker. I think I've seen both.
Yes.
But so that's nice to have. Especially, I probably prefer the fridge.
Which
up
one
there.
has that built-in round table?
That's also in the 400.
Yeah, that's
There's a
kind of
built-in
neat.
little bistro table in the back.
Yeah.
And because the stairs go straight down in the 400, you have a little more space in that Flybridge rear area of the Flybridge. A little bit more space for chairs.
Okay.
But the 390 has space up there. It's fine space.
Yes.
But yeah, so I think that's the main difference with the Flybridge. A lot of the original 350s were Caterpillar 3116 300 horsepower, or the 3126 350 horsepower, and then the twin engines often were the Yanmar 240 horsepower. So it seems like that was very popular for the twin engines. And of course, the twin engines didn't have a bow thruster. Those ones were really strong, good engines, but they started going more towards the Cummins and the Yanmars in later models. So unless you ask for it, you could get that
Right.
But with the twin screws, they call them twin screws, you could do a lot of maneuvering that you needed a bow thruster for if you had a single screw.
True.
Let's talk fuel economy. So the most common engines are the single 370 horsepower Yanmar and the twin 240 horsepower Yanmar. For the 370 horsepower single Yanmar, it's most efficient at 7 to 9 knots, where you're getting about 2 miles per gallon. And the top speed can get up to about 13 to 14 knots, but you're using a lot of fuel there. You end up getting about 0.5 miles per gallon. With the twin 240 horsepower Yanmars, you can get 8 knots still at about 2 miles per gallon, which is great. And you also have a fast cruise, which is about 12 to 13 knots, where you're using about 1 mile per gallon. And then in addition, the top speed, 15 to 16 knots, is about 20 to 25 gallons. So you get, again, about half of a mile per gallon.
So you can get a 350 even under 100,000 but you might need some work. A 350 generally is in that 100,000 range.
Because remember, the newest 350 is 1999.
Right. And then the 390s range from about low hundreds to mid to upper 100s. and then the Mainship 400s started around 150, 175, and they can go up to 275. Because some of them, I mean, they're newer, obviously, and they...
Some of them are in incredibly
excellent
good shape. People, for example, might do the loop and care for it beautifully while they're on the loop for their own
Right.
purposes, and then and want to also get that resale value, knowing that it is such a popular and strong boat for the loop. So,
and what's interesting is...
people look for them, and
Yeah,
they'll
and
hold
the
their
funny
value.
thing about the 400s is when they were new in the early mid-2000s, 2005, 2006, they were about 200,000 or less. That's how much they cost. So brand new. So now but people are adding things to them. They didn't come with a full isinglass enclosure necessarily, so a lot of them have added that. You know, you've added
Oh, sure.
the single engines came with a bow thruster, but the twin engines did not. That just came with no bow thruster or stern thruster. But some people have added a bow and a stern thruster. So you have things like that. People are adding AIS.
They've updated their electronics. That can be huge.
Added electronics. So when you think about it, you might be getting a better boat in, 2026 than you were in 2006 because they've added so much to it. So, and of course inflation. But it's a good solid 400 at about, say, 200 to 225,000 if it's in good shape. You're getting a pretty good boat. You get a really good boat. You can go cruising all over, intercoastal. You could do the Great Loop. You could just do weekend and week trips on it. A lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I hope you got some information out of it that might be useful to you. And if you are looking for your Great Loop boat, consider the Mainship. You can also go to the Mainship 430, but the 390s and the 400s are great they're great couples boats is really what they are.
Right.
If it's just a couple and you
you
might
may have
some
guests
friends,
from now.
now and then.
Now and then,
that's
exactly.
fine. But for a couple, they're a really great boat. So if you like that, we're going to do more videos on this boat. We're going to be cruising the Chesapeake Bay this summer, up and down, hitting a couple interesting cities and
trying
towns,
testing out
marinas.
everything on this 430 because there's a lot to learn, and maybe we'll figure out how to anchor and
anchoring. Trying to stay overnight.
Yeah,
with the
absolutely.
battery systems, seeing how that works. So we have a lot going on. So why don't you follow along, and you can come with us and learn right along with us.
Yes. Have a great day.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, please consider subscribing. Also, give us a like and drop us a comment to let us know what you think about these Mainships. And make sure to follow along as we cruise the Chesapeake Bay this summer on our Mainship 430. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.